All right. Good morning, guys. It is Gary Mauris from DLC head office. It is September 11th, 2024. First off, I want to welcome all of you back. Hope you guys have all had a incredible summer. I always love this time of year. This time of year, it feels to me like it's almost the new year again, right? Where we get a fresh slate of new days. Everyone is engaged and invigorated to get back to work. Some of us have had some family time, some downtime. You can see in the background still at the lake. I'm heading home later on this week and back right into it. This is a very special Level Up program today. I am super excited about it. I have someone who has become, a friend of mine. I really admire this individual who's going to be our guest today. I wanted to reach out to all of you who are sort of tuning in right now. I'm seeing some of the messages pop up. This is going to be interactive today. If anyone has any questions, obviously, as always, you can put those questions in the comment or the chat. Reach out online right now. Tell us sort of where you're tuning in from and what market. My guest today is a gentleman by the name of Jeff Adamson. Jeff's an amazing individual. I want to kind of just start off by reading his bio. It's short and sweet for us. Jeff Adamson is the Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder of Neo Financial, Canada's first digital banking platform designed to help businesses grow while providing Canadians a better way to grow and manage their money. Jeff's background runs deep in entrepreneurship, and he knows firsthand the challenges of building a business. Previous to founding Neo Financial, Jeff co-founded Skip the Dishes, which obviously has become Canada's leading food ordering and delivering platform, which grew to over 3,000 employees and 6 million customers. In building Skip, Jeff worked with thousands of business owners from a small local cafe to large multinational corporations in finding new opportunities for growth. Now, as co-founder and chief merchant officer of Neo Financial, Jeff and his team help businesses grow by enabling them to share in the upside of the financial technology. Jeff also hosts a podcast called Behind the Brand. So make sure that after this, you search that out. So with that, I just wanted to welcome and say good morning to Jeff Adamson. Jeff, how are you?
Hey, doing well, Gary. Great to be here.
Jeff, you know what? It's an absolute privilege to have you on our program today. You're calling in from Calgary, obviously. How's things in Calgary?
Not too bad. Yeah. I mean, if you've been following the news, it always seems like there's either like a wildfire or a water shortage. But aside from those things, life is pretty good in Calgary.
Yeah, I understand that. Jeff, let's sort of jump right in here. I'm sorry, I had somebody at my door here. I'll just ignore that for a minute. So Jeff, this is a really fascinating story today, and I'm really excited about having you on the program. Obviously, you guys are doing something that is incredible with Neo Financial, and we're going to get into that today. But I'd like to maybe start off with talking to our viewers a little bit about sort of you and your history. You grew up in small town Saskatoon, I think a community of less than 100 people. I think you had 2 siblings, and it was small town life and small town living, and you came from a very unassuming background. Obviously, a family that wasn't riddled in entrepreneurship, and to see what you've done and what you've created and sort of your journey along the way is a fascinating story. Maybe just kind of tell us about the early days and those roots.
Yeah, like you said, Gary, and also it's an honor to be here as well. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing at DLC. Yeah, I grew up in Saskatchewan, so a community called Grasswood, which is just south of Saskatoon. And yeah, it's a very different life growing up in a really small community. When I think about the experience my kids have growing up, where there's probably 100,000 people just in my neighborhood in Calgary. And if you walk out the front door, you're right in front of a ton of people. Whereas where I grew up, you walk out the front door and you've got nothing kind of but farmers' fields, and your closest neighbor is hundreds of meters away, or So I think it's a lot more around kind of making your own fun. So I spent a lot of my childhood, which was just kind of running around the yard, doing chores with my parents, yard work. And I think that it really kind of imprinted on me at a very young age of just always focused on doing something to kind of move the family forward. And my parents did, I think, a really good job as a kid, kind of keeping me busy and keeping me involved in either different projects around our yard, around our property. And then once I kind of got a little bit older, they just kind of threw me into sports. And as a kid, I was playing soccer and softball and hockey and wrestling and canoeing, and so that was kind of, I think, the next thing that they put me into to kind of keep me busy, and that really just kind of took over my life from a very young age. Was just kind of this, I don't want to say obsession, because as a kid you're just kind of doing these things for fun, um, but it just kind of became such a huge part of my life, focusing on sports and seeing the opportunities that sports provided to me, um, and also understanding that like there was a lot of things that I just absolutely sucked at as a kid. Like I was a terrible baseball, softball player. I was never really all that good at soccer. But then there's kind of a few things that you start noticing that, hey, I really like doing this. It's really fun, and you kind of happen to be okay at it, and then kind of seeing how the more you focus on it, the more time you put into it, um, the better you get, and the opportunities that it provides when you do get a little bit better. But yeah, like you said, like I didn't, my parents, they weren't entrepreneurs. My dad was a firefighter. My mom stayed at home, was a part-time pharmacist at the hospital in Saskatoon.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like we grew up with heaps and heaps of money. I wasn't that kid with the lemonade stand who was starting all these different side hustles. I literally didn't know the first thing about starting a company. And it really wasn't until after I had finished my wrestling career that I really started understanding what did it mean to start a company on our own.
And I think it's interesting too, Jeff, because you talk about how you got into wrestling. I think you were 5 or 6 years old, and I read something that your parents put you into wrestling because it was very inexpensive daycare. It was like $50 a year to sign up for wrestling, and you could drop your child off, and you'd spend hours and hours there. And I think in the early days of wrestling, you didn't love it, and I think as you started to get better, you started to think, wow, this is interesting. This is something that I'm good at, and a lot of those traits obviously are in your DNA, and we see that today in what you have currently built in the past and what you're building today. At what point in wrestling did you realize, hey, I'm good at this, and maybe I can do this at an elite level? Because of course, I do want to talk about that, right? You're a decorated athlete. You are a multi-time national champion. You got a bronze medal at the Pan Am Games. Was it the Pan Am Games? Pan Am Games, correct? Right? You competed in the Olympics in 2012. So, from just, some, young boy to sort of the upper echelon of world-class wrestling, it's a hell of a journey.
Well, yeah, and I got to go to the Olympics. I didn't actually get to compete, and there's a whole story behind that too. But when I was a kid, I was, I think overcome with anxiety of competing. It was actually incredibly stressful for me. In wrestling, unlike the team sport, you can't hide at all. Like if you win or lose, it's kind of all on you.
Mm-hmm.
So it really kind of forces you to just take full accountability and ownership out of over your outcomes. And I just remember just matches. I would almost feel like throwing up sometimes before matches. That's how nervous I would get as a kid. So I didn't really like it. My parents really, credit to them, like they kind of forced me to stay in the sport because I feel like they saw something that, if I could just kind of stick with it and see it through, that eventually that love of the sport would come. And thank goodness they didn't listen to me, because frankly, I probably told them I wanted to quit 1,000 times. But then once I kind of got through that hump of competing as a kid, kind of, I started when I was in kindergarten or grade 1, I think. And it wasn't really until I got to high school that I really started to enjoy it. I started enjoying the people I was around, the coaches, and seeing all the things I was learning from doing it. That's when I kind of went all in on wrestling. And but I think what it did teach me is that, like, sometimes when you're doing something, like, especially in the beginning, like you may not really enjoy it at all, but you just got to stick with something long enough to actually get to the point where you can start seeing some success and start seeing the benefits of it. And I was able to see that, hey, if I actually get good at this sport, maybe this is the way that I can go and see the world. Growing up in Grasswood, Saskatchewan, it's a little bit far from seeing, how big and expansive the whole world is. But I knew that, listen, if I make a national team, or if I make a Pan American Games or Olympics team, then I can actually go to all these cool countries. I get to represent our country that I love so much. So for me, it was really kind of that opportunity to represent our country and see the world that got me really, really fired up. And just with wrestling, it's such a difficult sport. I know every sport is really, really challenging, but there's so many facets to wrestling that make it a really unique sport. In the sense that it's an individual sport. It's a combative sport. There's the weight management part of it, which requires a ton of discipline to kind of maintain your weight. It requires strength and speed and endurance. And it's a global sport as well. Almost every country in the world has competitors in this sport. And for my parents, it was a sport that they could get me into that didn't really cost a lot of money. And Saskatchewan had just had such an amazing history. Just before the podcast, we were talking about, some of these Olympic medalists that have come from Saskatchewan, which is a province of only 1 million people. But yeah, that was really kind of, I think, what helped develop some of the attributes that I would really lean on when I decided to start a company that really helped me out.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple quotes that I read that I dig into this because I believe that I love the fighter story. I love just a young, scrappy disruptor that gets kicked in the teeth over and over and over and keeps getting back up. Right. I think that if you look at anyone successful in business, so many of us share those same stories. But you have said in the past in an interview that I watched, nothing I've ever done is as hard as wrestling. Does that still hold true today? I mean, obviously, you're trying to disrupt the Canadian banking system right now.
Yeah.
This great big entrenched monster, and you're trying to disrupt it. Does that still hold true? Is it still the hardest thing you've ever done?
Honestly, I'd say it's still true. I mean, nothing has put me through the mental and physical paces like wrestling. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was 18, 19 years old, I won the opportunity to represent Canada at the Pan Am Championships in Venezuela. And I was an 18-year-old called, boy, because I hadn't really developed like a man basically. And so I'd gained a ton of weight, just basically, maybe it was like late puberty or something. I don't know. But my weight class was 66 kilograms, but I was putting on muscle. I was basically just ballooning up, and I had to get down to, I think it's like 145 pounds maybe. And so we got to Venezuela. I had to lose probably 7 kilos in 1 or 2 days. And so just the physical side of being able to kind of put yourself through that, and the mental stamina that you need to be able to compete at this level, it really kind of taught me a ton about discipline, hard work. And honestly, like, after I'd done that, after I fortunately won the Pan Am Championships, and I've had tons of great wins, tons of huge losses, but it's just, since I've done those things, everything else in life has just seemed so much easier because I put myself through so much hardship earlier in my life. And I'm just such a big fan, and not just wrestling, sports in general. I just think teach people a ton of valuable skills that I think it's hard to learn in other places, because it just replicates those environments over and over and over again and teaches those things every single day. And some of them are pretty painful lessons too.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I look at your roster at Neo now, and you guys have grown really quickly. But you guys are big fans of ex kind of retired athletes, right? You guys have hired a ton of athletes that have competed at very, very high levels, and I assume it's for all those characteristics that you speak of.
Yeah, and like, when you think about it, if you set the goal of building one of the most consumer-centric banks in the world, like, that's a very lofty goal. And so what we look for is people who understand what it means to set these lofty goals, and also know, more importantly, what is it going to take to actually achieve them? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I want to be a champion, I want to build an incredible business, whatever the goal might be. It's one thing to say it, but then to understand what are the sacrifices that are going to be needing to be made in order to actually achieve that goal. And like, who are the people you're going to need, and all the steps in between setting it and achieving it. And athletes have all done that. They've all set goals. They've fallen short of their goals. They've reset them. They've built a support network around them. And they've done it like hundreds or thousands of times. And so what I love to do is to just take people from all walks of life. And it could be sports, it could be playing guitar, it could be art. We really don't care. What we're looking for is just people who understand that and who want to join us in this mission, because we believe that financial services impacts everybody. It really is it's the grease on the wheels of the economic machine of any country. And if you have a ton of friction in those gears, that hurts everybody. And I think in Canada, we have a massive opportunity to take financial services from kind of the medieval times that we're in right now and take it into the 21st century. And the benefit of doing that is going to be more prosperity for every single Canadian, because it's something that everyone uses. So we want the absolute best people to join us on that mission.
And we're going to dig into that a little bit here, a little bit later in this call. But it's interesting. It's come back like 360. I know that earlier this year, you were just inducted into the Saskatoon Sports Hall of Fame, which must have been a really cool honor for you and your family. Congratulations on that, pal. It was along that journey, though, when you were in London, I think, where you came back. You were coming back from London, but when you were in London, you had actually witnessed how far ahead, sort of, that area, the UK, was ahead of us in food service and apps in general. And I know that when you came back, you and a couple of sort of school, pals. Came up with the idea to start Skip the Dishes. And of course, Skip the Dishes, we all know what it is. It's one of the most, prolific brands in Canada now. It was an early adopter in food delivery service. You guys absolutely killed it. Maybe just tell us sort of like how wrestling took you to London, how you got that idea, and how it germinated and you guys came up with this concept. Would love to hear that story.
Yeah, I think it kind of starts with some of the same reasons why I was so excited to represent Canada as an athlete. And it's just because I'm so proud of this country and the potential that we have here as Canadians. I think we've got some of the most hardworking, resilient, intelligent, and caring people in the world. I just love this country so much. And, when I was abroad, I got to get exposure to what's happening in the rest of the world. And I was fortunate that another athlete who I was friends with from university, Josh Samer, he was actually living in London and had seen how people would use all these different apps to save time and money. So there was kind of like an app for everything. And you look kind of back in Canada and you're like, how come I can't press a button and get a ride? How come I can't press a button and watch my favorite shows or download music or get food delivered? And what we kind of thought was, listen, like this is gonna happen. There's kind of an inevitable march of technology and innovation that you really cannot stop. And if we don't do this for ourselves, then someone's going to come here and do it for us. And so that idea of saying, well, if we have this incredible country, these incredible people, why do we need to wait for someone in San Francisco or someone in London to bring us this technology and bring us these services that can save us time and money? And so the idea was really just to say, like, well, let's just build this ourselves. Like, I don't want some engineer in Silicon Valley being the one decides how an app is going to work in my own community. I want to be able to have an influence on how that's being developed and how it's being rolled out and what does it look like. And if you look at like even just how Skip the Dishes and how we marketed ourselves, it's really about that Canadian identity, Canadian values. It's kind of a little hokey a little bit and having fun around being Canadian. Skip the Dishes was actually a title sponsor for the Canadian Olympic Committee. So being able to do those things, have an impact on our community, create opportunities for people in high performance, information age, information economy jobs, that was really kind of the motivator to starting Skip the Dishes. And again, I don't give myself any of the credit. It's really our co-founding team, the early team that joined us in building this. And these are local people. We weren't bringing executives in from Silicon Valley to build this business. It was literally people who were working at a local bookstore. There were people who were at a local university who joined us in building the original version of Skip the Dishes and kind of lay down that foundation for what it is today.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys started in from my understanding, a small sort of basement office on York Street, right? And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it was my co-founder Chris Samer, literally in his basement. I remember, we had ordered all these tablets one time. We had to give restaurants tablets. We went from a restaurant having to accept the orders on a desktop computer. So if they got an order, the phone would ring, then they'd have to run to the back. They'd have to like turn on their computer. And again, like this is 2012. So like the computer would like start humming up and get moving. Then they'd like print out the order and bring it back to the kitchen. So within a year, we were like, that's not going to work. So we ended up ordering all these tablets from China, and we got like a shipment on a tugboat that rolled in of these like off-label. They were not iPads. We couldn't afford those.
Right.
They were like they were like $8 tablets, and half of them didn't even work. They had the wrong plugins. His entire basement was just covered in boxes and wrappers, and we're setting up all these tablets, installing the software on them. That was really like, when I talk about like scrappy beginnings, like we were just a few of us. We had our friends programming menus. So we would take restaurant menus. We couldn't afford to pay them, so we just pick up a case of beer, and literally you'd see the quality of the programming decline as the beers were consumed.
As the night got later.
That comp model doesn't exactly scale, but it was kind of how we got going, because we didn't have any funding. We were just literally maxing out our own credit cards to fund the business.
Such a great story. So, one of the other things I've heard you say, right, to survive, you have to fight, right? And that's that can be hold true in life, obviously, in business, and all of the things. So I mean, you guys, from the very beginning, I mean, how long was the grind for with Skip? Did you guys just hire some people, or were you out yourself going door to door signing up restaurants? I mean, basically you're selling everyone on the vision and the dream at that point, and and hoping those passionate people will follow you.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't glamorous, Gary. Like it, and I know that there's tons of these stories out there of people getting their businesses started, and just how difficult it is. So I don't think I need to kind of harp on how difficult it is to start a company.
Right.
I think in our example, like we didn't go to Stanford, we didn't go to Harvard, so we didn't have the typical breeding, you'd say, of someone who's going to start like a massive technology company. And so when we're talking to investors, they're kind of like, okay, you're in Saskatchewan, you've got an office in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Like they're like, okay, like looking on a map to figure out where it is. And they're like, okay, are there direct flights from San Francisco? And so we got passed by every single investor, laughed out of the room constantly. People would say, maybe if you move to San Francisco, maybe then we'll decide if we want to fund you guys or not. So it was really the story of just us kind of taking whatever we had saved, not paying ourselves for a really long time. I literally was going door to door, talking to restaurant owners, getting laughed out of restaurants. I slept in my car a number of times. I was basically couch surfing. Fortunately, I knew a lot of folks just from athletes that lived in other cities that were nice enough to let me crash, in a spare bedroom or on the couch. Or I used to bring this roll up mattress. Actually, my dad was a firefighter, and they would throw the mattresses out after a certain amount of time from the fire halls, and so it was going to the garbage. And basically I asked my dad if I could have one of those old mattresses, and I would just roll it up, put it in the back of my car, and that would be what I would sleep on for. It was probably at least a year or two of doing that. And honestly, like, it doesn't, a lot of people, I feel like when they're starting a company, they'll say, hey, I'm going to get through this hard part, and then I'm going to be able to take it easy. And the thing that there's a quote I heard somewhere, and someone had asked, like, a Tour de France cyclist, how much easier is it now that you're like a Tour de France champion than when you were first cycling as a kid? And his response just stuck with me. It was such a brilliant response. He said, it's actually just as hard as when I was a kid. The only difference is I'm going a lot faster. Right. And so to me, it was like, that is so true about running a business, because there was a period of time where I had to give up on running a business ever getting easier, because it wasn't like it just never got easier. And it kept being really not depressing, but kind of disheartening when you're like, man, this is still really, really hard. But 3-4 years into this, and like, man, it's like sometimes even harder than it was in the beginning.
Right.
But the difference, though, is that now you're impacting millions of people. Now your the scale is so much bigger. You're growing so much faster, and so that kind of mindset of just always keeping the pedal on the metal, I think, is something that once I'd kind of given up on it getting easy, then I actually, it became a lot easier actually mentally for me to manage it, because I wasn't kind of being disappointed that it wasn't getting easier. I was more looking at what's the impact we're having, how fast are we growing, what are our customers saying about us. Those became the things that I started focusing on.
Yeah, so fascinating, such a great answer. It's interesting because I say that to people all the time. People go, "Oh, you've gotten to a certain size now or a certain scale now. It must be easier." And I just said, get used to suffering, right? It's over and over and over. The bigger you get, just, the more of it you see, right? The more challenging, the more,
Well,
unrest, the breakdowns,
and
it's
so
just,
much,
go ahead, Jess.
yeah, I think you're right though. I mean, so much of it is like a little bit of pain and suffering, and I think that everyone kind of knows that you go through a little bit of pain to get whatever gain that you're aiming for. So it's like there's all these things that we kind of know to be true, and so that's why like whenever I have chats like this, it's kind of like, it's not like new fundamental truths that I'm revealing that people don't know. It just, because everyone kind of knows. Like, for example, like you go for a jog, that's good for you. Well, why don't we all go for a jog every day then? Well, it's because it's tough. You just
Right.
don't want to sometimes. So yeah, it's just all those fundamental truths of going through a little bit of pain and suffering, but then on the quest to achieve something that you really, really is important to you.
Yeah, but it's such a great message, right? And even if I think about who's on this call, and I look at our mortgage professionals across Canada, this last year was a harder year. There's no question, right? We had endless rate increases. It was a very hard year compared to the years before. But it's just it's hope, having them all understand that it's hard, it's a grind, and I always say to people, get good at getting better rather than get good at starting over or doing something new, because I promise you, when you get through it on the other side, you'll come out and you'll be that much better, and you'll be a thriving winner.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. So on that same vein, just because I want people to understand sort of what's involved, there's not really a like, everyone talks about this work-life balance, and there's not
Mhm.
really a work-life, a raging entrepreneur. I don't care if you want to be the number one mortgage professional in your individual market, or you want to build Skip the Dishes or Neil Financial or Dominion Lending Centers. It is hard work in order to be elite or be at the top. And I was talking to Wayne Kanu, obviously runs your mortgage division, and he just said, like, we're wired at Neo. He just goes, like, when there's work, we're here working. He goes, like, holidays get canceled. It's in our DNA. It's just what's demanded on us, right? And I think that's really important, right? Because to achieve at a high level, that's what it takes. So talk to me about sort of work-life balance from your perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's important to prioritize the things that are super important to you, and obviously that's very obvious. It's very difficult to actually execute that, because one way of describing, you could say it's a balance, or you could say it's actually a teeter-totter. And so there's going to be periods of time where things are extremely unbalanced in one direction or another. And I think where people maybe fall astray is when they're trying to maintain that balance at all times, and they see it as bad if it's tipped in one way or the other. And I think it's okay for it to be a period of time where it's maybe over-indexed and work is really, really intense, but then understanding that, okay, well, how long can you sustain that for? And what are the other things that you're sacrificing that are really important to you? And how long are you going to be willing to sacrifice those things? And I think that sometimes you need to actually bring it back. Like, for example, if your family life is falling apart because you're just working all the time, you're not there for the people who you love, well, you're probably going to have to bring it back, because you're going to burn out if you lose those other things that are important. A lot of people will look at it and say, no, like, I want to maintain that balance at all times. I want to golf every Friday. I want to go on 4-month-long vacations. That to me is not really going to lead itself to a lot of success in the long term. I haven't met many people who have just maintained that perfect balance and also achieved incredible things. Like, the athletes I know that have become Olympic champions are extremely unbalanced. Like, they are so intensely focused on achieving their goal that they forgo a lot of things for a very long time, but they maintain the things that are important to them, like those relationships, like their health, physically and mentally. So I think it's kind of just understanding, like, hey, if I'm going to be giving up some things, just making sure that I'm okay with that trade-off. How long am I okay with that trade-off for? And for me, Like, I'll give you an example, Gary, really quick. I was at the London Olympics. I was sitting next to one of my good friends and teammates, Matt Gentry, in the Stanford Hall of Fame, amazing guy. And he was preparing for the biggest match of his life. And I looked at him, and he just kind of almost looked like he had seen a ghost. He was just kind of like staring off into the distance. And I was kind of like, hey, are you okay? And just checking in with him. And he said, you know what? I actually feel great. He's like, I'm totally ready. I'm so excited for this. And I was like, how are you so relaxed though? How are you so calm? And he said, you know what? At the end of the day, whether or not I succeed in winning the Olympics or not, he says the things that really matter the most to me aren't going to change. He's like, my family is still going to love me just as much, whether I win or lose. He says, it's not like I'm going into a life or death fight where if I lose, I die. So I'm still going to have my health. So he's like, it really kind of put things in perspective to me that those two things were the things that mattered the most to him. And that was his way of kind of taking that pressure off of his shoulders. And that really stuck with me, because no matter how much I want Neo or Skip to win, there's some things that I'm just not going to compromise. And
Right.
I'm going to make sure that I'm going to communicate with people around me so that they understand, what are the things that are important to me, and how can I be there for them? How can they be there for me as well along that journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. So let's sort of wrap the Skip segment of this interview now. So you built Skip. You had tremendous success. You guys had an exit and sold it, I believe, in 2018. Um, sort of the next, from the transition from Skip to Neo, how did that take place? What was that conversation? Where did that start? And I mean, all of a sudden you said, okay, we just disrupted the food delivery service in a very competitive market and did it well. Now we want to disrupt the sort of 100-year-old Canadian banking system. Walk us through that.
Yeah, and I think I'll touch on just the exit that we did have, because I think that there's a couple of important things there. And I think for us, the reason we never had built Skip and said, hey, we really want to sell this company, we're building it to sell it. We just wanted to build a very important business that was going to have an impact on as many Canadians as we can. And hopefully we create enough value that someone thinks it's worth money. But whether that's we sell it or IPO, we felt like it was important to return money to shareholders, to employees, and kind of recycle capital and talent within the Canadian economy. And the other thing was that we felt like by selling to a company that had that global reach, it actually could accelerate that mission of creating more opportunities for Canadians. And obviously that's the result that's happened, is that the Skip has grown. They have thousands of employees. It's having an impact still today. But the transition was really around, I remember we had exited. I had left the company. I was the last founder to leave the business. And I was kind of a little bit unsure of kind of what to do next. Like, the business was much more about executive leadership, managing up public markets, kind of something I didn't really feel like I was the best at. And I kind of felt like there's probably someone who can do this better than me. And I'd always preached along the way, like, always try to find the best person for the role, and don't overstay your usefulness. And so I felt like the time was right. We had already placed an executive team. And then it kind of came, well, what's next? And then you just basically, like, what do I do now? I think I was maybe 30, 31. And it's kind of like you have enough money to retire. And you're just kind of like, well, what do you do? Do you just kind of get into investing and kind of like, what are you going to do to fill your time? And I kind of felt really lost, if I'm being honest, Gary. Like, I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I stayed in touch with the other founders of Skip. And I remember talking to Andrew, who's my partner here at Neo. And I said, well, what do most founders do after they sell their company? And he was like, yeah, most of the ones I've talked to, Jeff, they just get into commercial real estate. And I kind of was like, well, first of all, I know nothing about doing that. And being kind of a passive investor, just to me, just didn't really seem like the best use of the gifts that I had developed and the talents that I had developed from building Skip. And then we started talking about banking, and I was like, okay, well, I had just had a terrible banking experience. I remember I was trying to close an account. It literally took me weeks of time to the point where they're like, you're going to have to come in and talk to a branch manager to close a bank account. And I just couldn't believe that, in an industry with such, massive companies, such household names like RBC and TD and Scotia, that they could be offering such a poor experience to a customer. And on top of that, just the lack of technology, just seeing how technology had evolved in every single industry, and just kind of scratching my head and wondering, like, well, why does it still feel like we're in the 1990s when I use a banking app or go online? Why am I still having to go into a branch to do just basic things like close an account? And so that kind of felt like, okay, I think there's an opportunity here. And the other thing, Gary, was like, I felt like I had built up so much relationship capital. And what I mean by that is, when you go through incredible difficult times with people who you care a lot about, and you come out on the other side, there's something that happens between you and those people. They really get to see you at your best and at your worst. And you just get to know them extremely well. And for me to kind of throw that away and not really find something new where I could really kind of capitalize on that investment that we had put into building these relationships, just seemed like it would be a little bit of a waste. And so now I was thinking, okay, we have an industry that we feel like could use a little bit of a refresh. We have learned a lot from building these previous companies, and we've got these amazing relationships with incredibly talented people. I think we should probably go and start another company. And that was kind of the decision-making process of starting Neo. And it's been just a wild ride since we started, because I think we're the fastest growing financial services company in Canadian history. We got to over 1 million customers in like only a couple of years. So it's been a pretty wild ride. And again, it's the same thing as Skip. It's just learning a ton, going through, epic battles every single day, fighting on behalf of our customers, and really trying to push this whole industry forward and help increase the competition in the industry to the benefit of Canadian customers.
Yeah, it's interesting, to sort of, you learn the second time around some of the mistakes you made the first time, but a lot of those relationships you've created, you bring with you. And if I look at Neo Financial right now, and I look at the people who are supporting you, and I'm going to talk about one of the most prolific investors in the world, a gentleman by the name of Peter Thiel, right? And Peter Thiel is a huge investor in Neo Financial. Obviously was an early investor in companies like Airbnb and Facebook and Stripe and PayPal, and, a host of other, large people that have put their capital behind what you and your partners are doing in Neo. And, I think looking back now, just a few years in, everyone's really happy with sort of what you guys are doing and how you're running the business. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So let's talk about the actual platform itself. It really is sort of a community. Maybe explain to us in simple terms what Neo is, and obviously one of your slogans is to reinforce common sense lending, in our case in the mortgage space. But it's a financial platform that's more rewarding the more that you use it. So maybe if you could just, from the founder's perspective, what are you trying to accomplish with Neo? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is really to put the customer back at the center of banking. And when you think about the simple way to kind of phrase Neo would be just banking the way it should be. It's 2024. You shouldn't have these clunky experiences where you're just kind of confused as to why does it work that way. So we literally had to build really from the bare metal all the way up, all the technology, all the infrastructure we built from scratch here, both in Calgary and Winnipeg. Re-engineered the entire platform. So we built the kind of core banking system, all the things kind of under the hood, to then reimagine how these different products work. And so we have credit cards, debit cards, investments. We're a mortgage lender as well. We have bank accounts. And the way that they work is more akin to what you'd see with like a Spotify or Netflix. It just kind of, it's very intuitive. Opening an account takes seconds. Same thing with closing an account. Like it's very seamless. And the more you use it, the more it learns and personalizes to your own spending and saving habits. And one example is we actually built a network of over 14,000 retailers where our customers can get like 20% cash back. And on top of that, the average Canadian has about $5,000 sitting in a checking account where they get really no value at all. I mean, the value that the big banks give you for holding that money with them is they just won't charge you a $20 monthly fee. What we give our customers is actually not only interest on deposits, but also then you can get more cash back on your spending as well. So the more deposits you have, the more rewarding the experience is across the whole experience. And we try to look at it as really a holistic experience. How do the products work together? So on the mortgages front, I'm super excited because this is a business line that we're investing in for the long run. And so what we're doing right now is spending a lot of time listening to brokers, listening to customers, and trying to say, what is the mortgage experience of the future that a broker and a customer wants? Like, what if you could get more cash back or more interest on your deposits by having a mortgage? How can we take the friction out of the mortgage experience? How do we shorten it? How do we increase communication? So those are all the things that we're doing right now, is listening and then saying, okay, let's take these back. And the nice thing is that if you're a broker, you're literally 1 to 2 degrees removed from the person who actually makes the decisions on how our mortgage platform is going to be engineered. And you compare that to a big bank where there's an infinite number of degrees of separation between you and the person who's actually going to make the change that you want. So I'm extremely excited about what we're doing in mortgages and just about the Neo platform in general.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what, I would, sort of add on to those sentiments. We work with a lot of lenders across the country, and it's so refreshing and so nice to see a young upstart that is energetic and has passion, and that really is very clear in their goals, wants to be number one, right? You're coming into the space to absolutely knock it out of the park. And when I asked you guys how you're going to do that, you said, obviously our rate, and our product has to be very competitive, which it is, and you guys are adding to that all the time, and it brought on great people. But you're a fast application to approval is you're trying to get it done in 24 hours. You're saying we will get an approval to you within 24 hours. The communication when you're staying in touch, right, to collecting docs, to completing the mortgage transaction is very, very good. And I know you guys are absolutely driven to make this the best experience for mortgage professionals and ultimately for the consumer, right? In the Canadian mortgage space, speed and quality is a huge sort of foundation of what you guys are trying to achieve here. And the other thing I should mention is that I'm an investor in Neo. I believe in the group and the leadership, but we've also done an exclusive deal with Dominion Lending Center. So the Neo mortgage product is going to be offered through the DLC G group of companies, and we're just so excited about what you guys are continuing to build on tech, and because there's been no real tech innovation in the Canadian mortgage space. Even today, there's some little guys that kind of think they have tech, but what you guys are building and are rolling out and have on your roadmap is extraordinary.
Well, thanks, Gary. And we're super excited to be partnered up with DLC. And one of the things, like we just believe so strongly in the power of entrepreneurship. And, from the very first conversations we had with you and with Dave, we had that alignment around having an impact and really winning in this space. We wanted to partner up with a winning team. And that's kind of what we found with you guys and the brokers that you guys have brought on board. And so for us, we felt like there was a strong desire for the future to look different than the past. And when you think about a mortgage, people don't want a mortgage. They want to buy a home. And so then how do we actually then make that as easy as possible for the customer? So we felt like the alignment we had with the brokers that we'd spoken to, with the team at DLC, was really going to be the team that was going to be able to really help inform us on how we want to shape that future together. So this isn't something that we're dipping our toe in. This is a long-term bet that we're making on the broker channel and on DLC. And I encourage you, if there's anyone listening on this call, I'd say try us out, pass along your feedback, because like I said earlier, you're literally 1 degree or 2 degrees away from the people who are going to take that feedback and actually put it into execution and make those changes. And if you look at what we've done, we literally went from 0 to 8 million customers that skip the dishes in just a few years at Neo. We've been the fastest growing financial services company in Canadian history. These changes are not going to take long. We move incredibly quick. Our team is here day and night focusing on how do we actually improve this experience. So for anyone who's already used Neo, I at first want to just say how grateful I am for you guys placing your confidence in us. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to try. And then whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, whatever it is, pass along that feedback to us so that we can then take it in and start making those improvements so that they can happen right away.
Yeah, and Dave, if you can maybe at some point put on the screen the best way to reach out and contact Neo to get signed up if you're not already signed up with Neo. Even the sign-up process, the sign-up process to get a new lender on in the Canadian mortgage space in most cases is very difficult. It happens almost instantly in Neo. It's so quick and so slick. You guys have done such a great job on this. The other thing that I like about it is I kind of feel like I get in real time to experience and be part of the innovation, right? And be part of kind of the journey, right? As this young upstart company that's trying to, kick ass in the Canadian mortgage space. These are early days. And, I get to give proper feedback to what you guys are doing. And, when you get to a point where we're going to be able to, both from a broker and a customer standpoint, like literally have the consumer follow their mortgage journey from first phone call to app, integration, to getting the information, to collecting documentation, to scheduling broker complete, to scheduling funding. And you can see it right on your phone. So you always know where you're at. There's no waiting for a broker to get back to you, or there's no waiting for, the lender to get back to you and tell you what they're doing. Like, these kind of meaningful steps in our space is going to radically change the Canadian mortgage space. I mean, it's very, very cool to be part of.
Yeah. And I think like for us, again, back to that entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial mindset, Canada right now is in the bottom 5 in the developed world in digital banking. That includes mortgages. Bottom 5.
Yeah, crazy.
Yet we're top 5 in the world from a secondary, tertiary education, smartphone penetration, internet usage. So there is this massive gap that we have, and Canadians are paying for it every single day. And how many people on this call today have missed out on a deal or had a customer upset because of something outside of their control, and something that is very solvable by basic technology? And oftentimes it's like you just scratch your head and you just can't understand, like, why is it the way it is? And the answer is that it doesn't actually need to be. We just need a group of people to put their hands up and say, we want it to be different, and we're going to put in the work. We're going to spend the time listening, and we're going to build the platform that customers actually want and catch up to the rest of the world. Because, like, for example, in Denmark, you can actually get a mortgage in a day, full process complete, done. So if they can do it, why can't we do it? And that's what we're working on. And that's what we need the support of, more than just the people here who have joined Neo, but everyone on this call to join us in that journey of reinventing and reimagining that experience. And then for the benefit of the customer, and then of course as a byproduct of that, to the benefit of all the brokers.
Well, one of the things that I recommend anyone who's watching or listening right now, just, go to the Neo, get signed up, with a Neo account and understand it, to build to offer the customers. I mean, obviously we're going to lead with the mortgages. That's the business that we're in. But, to be able to say, like, who is Neo? Well, what, they're disrupting the Canadian banking system right now. They have the highest, paying high interest savings account. They have this great credit card where you can get, discounts and cashbacks from, 14,000 different partners that they've signed up across the country, travel partners and so on. Like it allows us to be able to talk to our customers and explain that this is a lender doing something a little bit different, which is really cool and very compelling. Jeff, that's great. So I think what I want to wrap with today is I have something we call rapid fire questions, and it's just short answers on a series of questions. And it's really sort of just intended to get to know, the leadership of Neo. So maybe I'll just jump in there and start. So for you, Jeff, are you happy or content?
Happy. I think content sounds kind of boring.
You get stuck, right? When you're content, you just stop thriving. Texting or talking?
Talking. Actually, I kind of throw people off sometimes because they'll text me and I just call them back.
Yeah.
I'm not a texter at all. I'm very bad at it.
Nickname your parents or friends called you as a kid or even today?
Oddly enough, my brother calls me hermano, and
Hermano,
which I think means brother in Spanish. And then my lot of the folks that I've worked with call me El Jefe, which I think means the boss in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, and I don't know why they have Spanish nicknames. Obviously,
Yeah,
I'm not.
that's funny. Secret indulgence.
Oh, Indian food. I love Indian food. I grew up like steak and potatoes as a kid, and then I tried Indian food for the first time when we started Skip and fell in love.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, really quickly before I finish this list here, I found this really fascinating that, as part of your daily ritual, you actually run to work. You run to work and you run home. Is that, you still doing
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I've been doing it since probably like 3 or 4 years now, actually,
How
of
far is the run?
running. It's about a 6K total trek,
Okay.
but it's actually it ended up being faster than driving. And then when I had kids, I like ran out of time to exercise, so my commute became the only way to get exercise.
Yeah, that's you know what? That's an example of a real disciplined person. That's amazing. Favorite holiday?
Oh, I love Christmas. I love getting the family together. Cold, like in Christmas, like honestly, in Saskatchewan, it was so cold you could throw a bucket of water in the air, it would turn into ice in midair. I don't know. I'm a big fan of just getting the family together around Christmas time.
Oh, favorite cocktail?
If it's a drink in general, a cold beer on a hot day is amazing. Or if it's not, then I'd say old fashioned.
Oh yeah, nice. What kind of music do you like? Favorite music?
You know what? Some good acoustic guitar. That kind of campfire style music. I don't know. It depends on the mood, but like if it's something relaxing, acoustic guitar.
That's good for the soul. What is your superpower or hidden talent?
Oh man, I don't know if any of my talents are hidden because I basically have to do everything I can every day to perform. Um, even though I never did any like running as a kid or as an athlete, I didn't do much. I've been getting into running, as I mentioned, like running to work, and so I ran an ultra marathon.
You're kind of like
Um,
Forrest Gump these days.
feels that way.
Yeah. Ultra marathon. How far was that?
That was 125K.
Oh my God. You did it over what, 24 hours?
Yeah, I think it was just under 21 hours.
Wow. Congratulations. Absolutely amazing. Um, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of just, the being able to kind of maintain these like great relationships, balancing like keeping my health, while still kind of having an impact on the community. I think I've been able to keep it all in check fairly well. It's definitely not easy, but I'm proud of being able to do that.
Yeah, good for you. It's very few people, can check all the boxes, entrepreneurship, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially. And so it sounds to me like you are doing a fairly good job of that. Good for you. What goal are you still trying to achieve? What haven't you, ticked off yet?
Well, building the world's most consumer-centric bank. That is still, we have not achieved that goal yet. That is a journey that we're on. And so it is a long-term goal, and one that will take many years to achieve.
Talking about that, what is the best advice that you've ever received? I know that's a very large question.
Oh man, I've had a lot of amazing coaches. Super lucky to have two really involved parents. I think it was kind of a lot of things don't go right, in life in general. And I think just, being told again and again, worry about the things you can control the controllables, don't worry about the things you can't. And that kind of helped, I think, relieve quite a bit of, stress and anxiety around just kind of trying to achieve your goals and then sometimes not falling short.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, who is your mentor? Who do you look to for inspiration? What do you read or what do you watch to sort of, fill your bucket?
I was really lucky. Like I said, my parents were both really involved. My mom and dad, I think, have been incredible role models for me growing up, teaching me the value of hard work and discipline and taking care of others. So I was extremely grateful to them. And like I draw a lot of inspiration. Like the Olympics just happened, and so I was like glued to the television watching these athletes and like their stories. And I just draw inspiration from anyone who's just incredibly, um, driven to achieve something, very aspirational. And honestly, I'm pretty agnostic, whether it's athletes or business people,
Right.
people who just dare to do things that are quite great. And then the stories that come from them on their journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. So fascinating. I share that same feeling. Um, any bad advice anyone gave you along the way that you look back and you go, what the hell were you thinking?
I think the one that was like kind of a head scratcher for me was like the one that says, follow your passion. And I was always confused by it because I was like, I don't know if I'm really passionate, and like I'm passionate about wrestling, but I can't really make a career out of doing that. Like it's,
Right.
after the Olympics, you're kind of done. So I was like, what do I do now? And I think what I didn't learn is that your passion will kind of grow from kind of being dedicated to something over a long period of time. So I think I was originally kind of waiting for my passion to show up, and it just never did. And so that was kind of a bit of a confusing one for me.
Yeah. Last two questions. If you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be?
Oh man, that's a long list. I'm interested in leaders who have gone through hardships, and the story of Teddy Roosevelt is one that really stands out. And that quote, kind of the man in the arena, I think is a really interesting one. I feel like he had such an interesting life. Like he literally ended up getting shot and then gave a speech afterwards, and then just led through some incredible reforms in the U.S. That would be a pretty cool conversation, I think.
Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely. And then last question for us. What are you most grateful for?
Oh, my wife, I'd say.
That is such a good answer, buddy. You got so many points there.
I don't think she doesn't tune into my podcast. She doesn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she's ever going to see this, but she's been there for me kind of through the thick and thin. And she is such an incredible woman that I'm so lucky to have in my life. And we've got two incredible little boys at home, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And, coming home to them every day, I feel so lucky.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, had a lot of people on this podcast over the last few years. Really enjoyed today's session. You are absolutely an inspiration to all. You're humble. You're down to earth. You're sincere. You're smart, and I can see why people follow you. I can see why you have this massive group of high-profile investors behind you guys. I wish you nothing but success. I think you're going to absolutely knock it out of the park. I know your business partner a bit as well, and I think you guys are two peas in a pod. So on behalf of the DLCG group of companies, I want to thank you today for the time, for your insights, for your patience, for your stories, and all the advice you shared with us. Very, very cool, very inspirational. Anything you want to say last minute to anyone listening?
I just want to all the people who are listening, and you've got a lot of entrepreneurs, like what DLC has done to enable entrepreneurship in Canada. I just think it is so important what entrepreneurs are doing. And again, I'm playing a very small part. I think what you guys are doing is playing an even bigger part. And just keep going. If you ever think about giving up, it's just so important what all of the brokers in the DLC network are doing for Canadians and pushing us forward and constantly raising the standards. So please keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for the partnership, and thank you for having me on. Really, really grateful.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to wrap. I'm going to give the last 30 seconds to Dave to share. Dave, you have some updates for our networks that you want to talk about?
I certainly do. And just before I jump into those, thank you so much, Jeff. That was incredibly inspiring. I'm trying to keep up with all the comments here in the background of people thanking you. I think you've made some new fans and some people who are greatly appreciative of all the services that you and Neo have brought. And I know I could speak for most people. If it wasn't for Skip the Dishes, I'd probably have starved a few years ago. So thank you for doing that.
You'd be 30 pounds lighter anyway, right, David?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I want to just throw this up on the screen because you referenced it, and it's the man in the arena. Take a picture of this if you're not familiar with this quote. It is absolutely inspiring and incredible. So take a quick picture as I jump into one of our favorite topics here, just to kind of wrap it up, is AML. And just to remind everyone, all the stuff with anti-money laundering is coming up. We have Remic providing all of our training at no cost to our agents. There's all the dates that have come and passed in some respects and others that are coming up. Please, please, please make sure you're doing all that training so to be on the right side of all things FinTrack. Velocity sent out in a great email today for our full end-to-end integrated solution. This isn't a cobbling of third-party software. This is Velocity taking care of you once again. And lots of great integrations of the PEP, the politically exposed person, comprehensive broker panel, and as well the risk registry there as well, or the borrower risk assessment. You probably have seen the email that came out today. If you didn't and you want some more information on what is going on, don't hesitate. Drop me an email, dave@dlcg.ca. But let's keep on moving. And again, Jeff, just an incredible hour. So appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks very much, guys, to DLCG, to all of our agents, owners, our team members across the country, guys. We appreciate you. It's so nice to be back with you. It's great to see you in September. We're super excited about the next last half of the year. And please, as always, reach out at any time. Jeff, I'll get you to stay on for a minute as we meet you in the green room and we can chat. Thanks very much, guys. Have a great day.